away from the place I called home. Now we are in Texas. The year is 1999, and with my parents being divorced now, my mom was the only person bringing in the money. So, we ended up moving from a beautiful house in a suburban neighborhood and into an old house far in the country. This house was old looking, blue. When you walked inside the long, tall hallway, it went straight back to the kitchen. Going up the hallway were 2 rooms to the left, and the living room by the front door on the right, and further up was my mom's room. The first time I stepped foot in the house, I already had a bad feeling. I was 15 years old and was into the scary stuff. Still remembering all the things that happened from my previous homes, I had my guard up for any funny business. One night, after coming back from a high school football game, I found that I was home alone. My mom and the rest of the family were at my uncle's house that was literally up the dirt road. I was too afraid to walk over there because of how dark it was. My ride was already gone, and I was just there standing on my lightless porch. Yeah, my mom forgot to turn on the front porch light there before she left. So, standing there, I didn't really want to go inside. What to do? Well, at least she left the living room light on, I told myself. I unlocked the door and slowly walked in. The hallway was dark, not one single light on in the entire house. Only in the living room was the light and TV on. For a few seconds while shutting and locking the door, I stared into the dark hallway, hoping not to see anything. The kitchen was dark and had an eerie look to it, with the moonlight just barely shining into the window above the sink. I quickly ran into the living room. I sat on the couch and reached for the phone call to call my mom. But I then realized that the number list was hanging near the phone in the kitchen. There was no way in hell I was going into the kitchen. So I sat there, watching TV for a while. After a few minutes, I heard some music playing. I did not know where this was coming from, but I did know that it was coming from down the hallway near the bedrooms. My heart jumped and then stopped. At least it felt that way. Getting up from the couch, I walked towards the entrance and peeked around the corner. The music was playing louder. All I could see was darkness coming at me from all corners of the house. I decided to walk down the dark hall towards the sounds. I was trying to be the tough guy. The closer I went into the hallway, I could start getting a sense of where it was coming from. It was coming from the bathroom. When I got to the bathroom, I reached in and turned on the light before walking in. The radio was on, and it was on the sink. I thought to myself, maybe it was on the whole time and I just now heard it. I began to turn it off when I looked down and saw the cord unplugged from the wall. And at that instant, I ran out of the bathroom and up the hallway towards the front door. As I passed my mom's room, her door opened slowly, but I was running too fast to really notice. It seemed like an eternity unlocking the locks. I felt like I was going to go into shock. I got the last lock undone when I heard a moan coming from the kitchen. I opened the door, got out, then slammed it behind me. I ran to the road with nowhere to go. I was 15, but still wanted to cry. I was home alone, in a haunted house, and my mom was a mile away. I stood there with my hands on my hips, trying to catch my breath. It took me a few minutes to get my thoughts together. I convinced myself that I was overreacting. The radio must have had batteries in it. I walked back up to the porch and sat on the steps. I sat there waiting, and waiting, and waiting. I was laying down on my back after a few minutes. Then I hear this noise coming from inside the house. It sounded like someone was walking with a pair of flip-flops on. The sound was coming closer and closer to the door. I stood up and backed away from the porch. It got closer, all the while getting louder and faster. Then it stopped. I couldn't do this anymore, I thought to myself. I turned around and headed back towards the road now with a few tears in my eyes. But to my relief, my mom was coming up the driveway. I ran to the car and everyone steps out. "What's the matter?" my mom asked me after seeing my face and how distraught I was. "I hate it here, Mom." That's all I could say before my older sister screams out and walks back to the car in shock with her hand covering up one side of her face to not look in the direction of the house. Her eyes were wide open and her crying was held back. "What happened?" my mom then asked her. I will never forget what she told me. She told us she saw. She said that she saw 3 faces looking out of the bedroom window at us. She described them as melted together and had these angry frowns with the eyes missing. My mom believed her. I then told her what I had experienced, and after that, we ended up staying at my uncle's that night. The next morning, we were very nervous about going home. My older sister never came back. She stayed with family until we moved out. My youngest brother and sister didn't know about anything, and I didn't want to leave them or my mom alone, so I went home to watch over them. We ended up moving out a little after that. We had to move in with family until we could get another place. I believe that it was something that was trying to get me that night. Some evil, strong force that forced its way into this world and did everything it could to get closer to me. I believe it used the music to lure me in to where it was hiding in the kitchen. If I would have stayed in that house that night, I might have become possessed or something. My sister is still traumatized from that image of these faces that looked entwined together. I also later found out that my mom had experienced a negative presence in the house and had seen quite a few things, but kept her mouth shut to not worry or scare us. Thanks for reading, and hope to hear from some of you soon. P.S. The radio did have 5 batteries in it, but it needed 6 to work with it being unplugged. Old House Ghost. This happened just last month. A few days of terror for my family and me. We were house sitting for my mom while she went downstate for a short vacation. She told us that we could take her master bedroom because it was bigger and we could sleep with our 3 kids in there with us. We told her okay, but ended up not doing it because of the fact that it was her room and we didn't want the kids breaking anything. So we decided to take another room that was almost as big and already had a king-size bed and a baby bed for my youngest child. My mom's house is sorta old and was previously owned by my sister and her abusive husband. So this place has some bad vibes for so many years. My sister always said that she thought he put some bad curses or something in the house because of things she would see and how angry her husband would get out of the blue. Anyway, the room that we chose was always scary because my wife and I had experienced something strange in it during one Christmas about 5 years ago, but it already had everything and was very comfortable. That first night, we went to bed sort of late due to the kids being excited about staying the night at Grandma's. So around 11 o'clock, we tucked the kids in, shut the lights off. After they got to sleep, my wife and I sat on the floor near the bed and talked for a while. The room is near the kitchen, so when the light is on, we can see it under the door. Like that night, because of the lights in the room being off, we can easily see the light. After a while, my wife looks over at the door and asks, "Doesn't that look like someone is standing at the door?" I looked over and saw what she was talking about, so I replied, "Yes, but you know it's not." I was thinking maybe it was the uneven carpet that was making it look that way. So, after a while of talking, we ended up getting up and stretching before going to the restroom that was also in the room. We got out quietly to not wake up the kids and began to put on our night clothes, or at least tried to, because it was too dark to see everything at 100%, but we could see a little. A few minutes later, and my wife was dressed and already laying down next to the kids. I was still looking for a shirt to wear, but couldn't find one that I had packed in my bag. So I went to the closet that I had some clothes put away already. Trying not to stumble over toys, I get to my shirts and begin to look for one. Just then, with the little bit of light from the room, I see something on the corner of my eye next to me. I turn my head and try to adjust my eyes. Seconds later, I see a form of a man standing facing me with his head down, so all I could see was the top of his head. It looked like black hair, and it didn't have a shirt on. I could not move. The arms of the thing hung down to its sides, and the legs were partially spread apart. It almost looked like it was in a defense stance, like it was going to charge at me, but I did not move. I was in shock. Not too long after, I began to realize that the figure looked like me, as if I was looking in a mirror. I came to my senses and turned slowly towards the bed, at the same time looking at the bedroom door and seeing that the shadows that looked like a person standing there were gone. I went to my wife like a scared child and said, "There is someone in the room." She jumped up and turned on the light. There was nothing there. The bedroom door was locked from the inside, and the kids were still asleep. I was shaking up after I explained to her what I saw. I decided to stay up the rest of the night to watch over my family. The next morning, I was trying to understand what I saw and make a logical explanation of the events, but being me and believing in the supernatural, I was finding myself backed up into a corner about it. We could have packed our things and gone to another room, but for some stupid reason, we decided to stay. The next night, nothing happened. I was the last one to fall asleep, but only because I dozed off on the chair that was already in here. I slept like a baby. The third night, my wife and I were woken up by something that we heard in the kitchen. It almost sounded like whispering, but we could not make it out until we put our ears to the door. Like I said before, the room was next to the kitchen. We stood there, listening in the dark for a second, before we both agreed that it did sound like someone was talking in a low voice. My wife was freaking out at this point and turned to the bed to grab her phone. I asked what she was doing, and she told me she was going to call the police because we thought there was someone in the house. I went after her to calm her down before the whispering stopped. I went to the bathroom to turn on the light, so we had enough to see without waking up the kids. Then we put our ears back to the door. We heard nothing. Being in the room with no type of weapon or anything to go out there with to check out what it was, we ended up calling the police. I was trying to be tough about going out there, but I was also scared as hell. The cops got there a little while later and scoped out the place. The windows were all locked, and all of the doors that led outside were also locked. After the cops had left, I called my mom and told her what we had experienced so far while staying there. She wanted to come back home, but I told her to finish her vacation. I didn't want to be the reason for her vacation to be cut short. That was stupid of me. The fourth night, We did decide to stay in her room this night, to be away from the other one and the kitchen. It felt more relaxing in there because it was so empty and it was brighter with the moon hitting the windows. We fell asleep once again. At around 3:30, my wife wakes me up and tells me that something was on the other side of the bedroom door. My heart stops right then. Just hearing those words coming out of her mouth made me want to die. When I got brave, I asked her what she heard, and she said, "It sounds like the doorknob trying to turn." I woke up the kids this time, thinking someone actually broke in. For a few minutes, we sat quietly, waiting to hear what we thought would have been people walking around, if they did get in. The house is so old, so it has a lot of old boards that squeaked when you stepped on them. Nothing happened. We eventually fell back to sleep. I mean, it could have been her imagination playing tricks on her, right? Of course, that's what I definitely would like to think of it as, but I guess it wasn't at all. The next morning was great, because we knew that we could leave the next morning. We left the house all day and went out to eat. We got home late and decided to try to get the kids to bed by 10:30. We fell asleep with no hassle. It was around 1 in the morning when my oldest daughter shook me awake. She was sitting up in bed. When I looked over at her, I asked her what she was doing, and without being afraid or hesitant, and with the motion of her hand and finger, she pointed in a direction and says, "Do you see her?" I asked what she was talking about. She then says, "Look, she's standing right there." She was pointing by the TV that was at the corner of the room. The moon was the only thing giving us light in the room, so I really could not make out what she was looking at. I first thought she was asleep, and to this day, I just think she was talking in her sleep. But I looked at her and said, "What are you talking about? Get some sleep." I tried to lay her back down, hoping I didn't have to rock her back to sleep. But as I put my hand on her shoulder, she says, "Look, she's walking over here." All the while, pointing with her finger, bringing it closer and closer to the bed. I got the chills when she was doing that. I didn't want to look. Right then, my daughter screams at the top of her lungs in terror. The rest of the family jumps awake. We turn on the light, and my daughter is trying to move closer and closer to us, saying that she went under the bed, saying that over and over. We just got up and got our things together after that. I called my mom and told her that we were just going to leave because of the kids being afraid. I think she knew what was up because we had always had problems with the house. Like I said before, there was a lot of hate in the home from years past with my sister's abusive husband. So with all of the negative energy, I think it just built up to the point of chaos between our world and whatever the other world is that is bringing all of this. We haven't been back to visit since then. It's been a few weeks already, but I know we will try. Thanks for reading. Another creepy thing that just won't escape me. A ghost, perhaps? A few months ago, my wife and kids and I were staying the night at my mother's house, in a room that was added on later after building it. My mom was renting this house from this couple. This room was always kind of freaky. On one night, my wife said she saw this cylinder-shaped object floating in the room towards the door. I thought that was strange, but nothing compared to what she saw next. On the night that we last stayed there, my wife, my 2 little girls, and I were sleeping on a king-sized bed. I was also asleep, So was my oldest daughter. My wife is sitting up in bed, rocking my other little one in her arms. She swears she was still awake, but kind of dozing off, with nothing but the light of the computer modem, not the monitor. Only gave little light in the room, enough to make out the shapes of the objects in the room. Also, everyone else in the house was asleep, so no sound other than the buzzing. The bed was in the corner of the room. She was sleeping near the wall, and I was on the outside of the bed. She said she looked in my area and saw something kind of moving, like the very top of someone's head, more like a child in the crawling position. She told me later that it was moving really slow down the side of the bed. She was so scared. She double-checked to see if it wasn't either of the girls that may have gotten up to play or something. They both aren't scared of the dark. They were both asleep. Slowly, it kept crawling towards the foot of the bed until it got to the corner. When it got there, she told me that it poked its head up just enough to see the black of the eyes. But without hesitating, it ducked back down the turned corner, crawling a little faster towards my wife. She told me that she lied down as fast as she could, thinking it saw her. But again, she swears that she was awake. She shook me and whispered my name over and over until I woke up. He sat up quick and asked what was wrong. She told me, but I didn't want to see anything either. And I admit, I was freaked out too. All of the strange experiences that I have had all my life from a kid to a grown man sort of gotten my nerves all crazy. That is the event that happened that night. My mom no longer lives in that house. The bathroom in that house always scared me. When I would take showers there, my face would get numb all the way down to my arms. Thanks again for reading.